the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast, coming to you from pristineauction.com studios with your hosts, Jake Ciely, Chris Meaney, and Joe Holka.
Hello, Foot Clan! It's another week of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast, the DFS for the rest of us, hopefully helping you win money, hopefully we get in the money. I know Joe had a good week last week and missed even better, if not for Leonard Fournette, just a few more yards. But it was a good week all around. I think, Joe, some congratulations are in order for you, man.
Yeah, it feels a little bittersweet. I don't know if I deserve any congratulations whatsoever. But yeah, 3 more yards would have been the difference in about 20 grand. So that's always fun.
Whew. Oh,
jeez. Good times.
See, Chris, this is why I never go to that level, because I would just be infuriated for a month. I don't even think I could play the next week.
Yeah, I mean, to miss out on 20K on 3 yards is sickening. I almost just threw up just listening to that. I can't imagine, Joe, what you went through with that last week.
Just a good example of how bad or how top heavy some of those DraftKings tournaments are, right? So, I mean, and yeah, like at the stakes I'm at, it sounds a lot crazier than it actually was. But just the fact that you miss on that sort of score with 3 yards, it is tough to swallow. But hey, week 5, let's move on.
Yes, week 5, let's move on. I don't know if you see the video. I woke up feeling dangerous, so I have my Browns shirt on.
Nice. I should have wore my Baker.
Yeah.
Jeez, we should have planned ahead.
This is the Zelda one. Thank you, our friend Kenny over at RotoWare. Good guy.
Yeah, RotoWare is awesome.
I'll give him a shout out there. But speaking of shout outs, there you go. DFS Pass. I have stuff in there. Chris has stuff in there. You'll hear me reference. I'll talk about it actually probably right off the top. But the adjusted points allowed. That's a part of the group that's over there and all the content. So if you want to get into the DFS Pass, you can use the code. Guess what? Podcast, and you get 10% off. So let's get right into it. We start with cash as always. So let's do it.
Straight cash, homie.
All right. Well, you're the big winner of last week. I know it could have been better, Joe. But Joe, running backs. I think we all have the very first same running back.
Yeah, I think on both sites, the guy that we're talking about is still David Johnson. He's the guy that we talked about last week as well. 7,500 against the Cincinnati team. I think that this is going to be an extremely popular spot for people to kind of go back to. I think that people kind of needed to see it last week with him, but I think David Johnson is still a guy that now we can kind of project for his normal 20 touches, and we talk about it every week as well. Like a good amount of those are going to come through the air. Cincinnati's a team we can definitely target. I think this is going to be one of the games that has great pace. There's going to be a lot of plays in this game on both sides. Both teams throw the ball a ton as well, which just is going to lead to more plays as well. So on FanDuel in particular, DJ's price is pretty bad, but I think he's in play on DraftKings as well.
Yeah, I would say that's a great call. Value on both sites. Joe's right. And his work in the passing game, I mean, he's 2nd in targets, 3rd in catches, 5th in receiving yards among running backs. The Bengals have just been atrocious against running backs this year. 2nd most fantasy points last week. Yeah, no Kirk. So, we could see, 6-7 catches for DJ easily in this game. And we saw exactly what happened last week, right? Pittsburgh and Cincinnati Monday Night Football. Samuels had 8 grabs. Connor had 8 grabs. So, I mean, this is a good spot for DJ.
It's a great spot to go, as like I said, immediately to that APA, which you guys will see on the site. If you're part of the site, the average adjusted fantasy points allowed for running backs for all teams is 23. You guys want to guess what Cincinnati is?
I know that they give up 34 points a game to backs. I know that.
It's even worse when you adjust
Steelers game. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it's when you adjust for opponents, which that's what the AP, for everybody out there, if you're on the site and you're checking out, the adjusted points allowed is to adjust for the players that you're facing, because obviously if you face Patrick Mahomes every single week, or you face Eli Manning, who's not even playing anymore, but the disparity between the two, if you face one versus the other every single week, you're going to give up more fantasy points. So that's all included. It is 42.1 adjusted points allowed for running back. So if you don't play David Johnson, you're insane, in my opinion. So where else are you looking, Chris? Are we going to the other side of the ball? Because the ownership on Joe Mixon is really high.
Yeah, I mean, Mixon is interesting too. And Dalton's just throwing the ball so much. But this is a game that I feel like they can stay in it. They've just been so bad defensively that they've had to throw the ball a lot. I mean, bringing Zach Taylor in, it's just kind of a new offense. But, all of a sudden, John Ross is down, so maybe Joe Mixon gets more involved in the passing game potentially. I like going up to the top here again in Zeke. I think Zeke's pretty safe this week coming off a down game. Still touched the ball 24 times. He's just getting a ton of work.
And that's how you beat the Packers.
I mean, you saw last week, right? I mean, he had the 6 catches, but you saw last week what the Eagles were able to do against the Packers. Just run all over them. The offensive line of Philly's good. The offensive line in Dallas is good. They ranked 27th in rush DVOA defense, according to Football Outsiders. That's the Packers' run defense. So I think it's a good spot just to get Zeke right. So I have no problems, spending up for him in cash. Obviously, DJ is a much better value, but I think there's some safety there with Zeke as well.
What do you think, Joe? Zeke as well, somewhere else?
I think Zeke, if you're just looking purely at the guys we have at the top, I think I still prefer McCaffrey and Kamara in that range. But if everyone's kind of jumping off the Zeke train, he is 8,300, right? So him versus Dalvin Cook, I think that's more of the decision point. I still think that McCaffrey and Kamara are the guys that you'd be skewing towards in cash. But I mean, it's hard to argue with any of these guys. I'm always on team pay up at running back, right? So I think you can make an argument for all these guys.
Well, you're not worried at all with Kamara facing the Bucks' stout, unbelievably great defense this year? For the guess the run.
Yeah,
gets the run. Yeah,
it makes for awesome content, right? Talking about all these defensive matchups and whatnot. I just think that it's so early in the year. I'm trying not to have that skew my decision making yet. But yeah, 8,600. Well,
here's what I'll say. I was obviously tongue in cheek, but with Kamara, I think the biggest thing is the Bucks are so terrible against the pass. Kamara could have 20 yards rushing and still end up as a top 5 running back because of everything he might do in the passing game this week.
Yeah. Agreed. And you're right, Jake. They have been good against running backs. I mean, McCaffrey only had 37. Yeah, amazing. The second fewest rushing yards allowed. And McCaffrey only had 37 over 16 carries. I mean, Barkley got hurt in that game, but he had 8 rushing attempts. He only had 10. I mean, Gurley, they didn't even bother trying last week. I know they were down in that game in LA and they threw the ball a ton, but Gurley only had 5 for 16. He had the 2 rushing touchdowns, which even skews the number a little bit because fantasy points against, they're just not giving up anything to the backs. But Kamara, to your point, could you come away in this game and have 10 grabs like he did a couple weeks ago?
All right, let me throw out some cheap names at you and see what your guys' thoughts are. Joe, what do you think about? I'll give you all 3 of them, and you can say if you like any, you think you're trash, you're not even wasting your time. Actually, I'll give you 4. I'm going to change that. I'm going to give you 4. David Montgomery is in the 5,000s. I'm going to give you Aaron Jones is 5,900 and 6,800. I'll give you Ronald Jones at 4,600 and 5,900. And then everybody had him last week as a plug-and-play, almost free space, Wayne Gallman, but he's going against the Vikings. Any of those 4 that you would even consider?
Yeah, I'll leave Tariq Cohen to you guys because I know you have some takes as far as that's concerned, but I think it could easily be a David Montgomery game. He's someone that, we're talking about someone that's been active in the passing game as well, 5 targets last week, 3 in the 2 weeks before. So, I mean, at least we're seeing that a little bit more. 21 attempts on the ground last week. I think he's severely underpriced. So it's not that I never pay down for running back. I'm just not going to pay down for someone that I don't think has at least 25 touch upside. So I think David Montgomery at 5,200 against Oakland, I get it, they're on the road. The team total's not great, but they're still favorites. I'm on the David Montgomery train this week for sure.
I'm on there too. And I'm definitely not on Cohen. He's probably a better shot on DraftKings if you play multiple lineups. This is looking last year in 2 games with Chase Daniel, 22 targets, 19 grabs, 201 receiving yards, 5 targets last week was tied for a team high. He only caught 2 of them. I think it's a Montgomery week as well. I'm just so encouraged with the 21 carries on the ground. Wasn't as efficient, but Joe brings up a point. 3 catches. I think it's back-to-back weeks now. He has 3 grabs, and this is a pretty good spot for him. Oakland's just not going to be able to do anything offensively. You figure that the Bears defense just shuts them down, and maybe they lean on Montgomery just a little bit more with this quarterback change. Chicago could be better offensively with Daniel, but I think that they'll just lean on both of these backs moving forward.
All right. Well, actually, there's one more we didn't mention, maybe on DraftKings specifically. Jalen Samuels with that new look. Hey, we're just going to throw it 5-10 yards at a time at most. Steelers offense. I think Joe's got a smirk, so I'm just going to go to him first.
I don't play these guys, but yeah, I think it's more or less that. I mean, are you penciling him in at this point for some passing yards? Is that a thing? Just give him his 15
James
yards.
James Conner and Jalen Samuels are the top 2 receivers for the Steelers.
Right? Stack them up.
16 catches last week between the 2. Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's getting a little bit cute, but if you're playing, I will always say too, I'm playing single entry. So if you guys are playing a lot of teams, a lot of these guys are in play for you guys, just not for me.
Okay, so let's talk wide receiver. And Joe's got his Will Fuller jersey in the mail. Just saying for that. Do you guys want to guess who the top 2 projected ownership wide receivers are right now?
Hopkins.
Tyler Boyd, Larry Fitzgerald.
Nope.
Is Keenan Allen still up there?
Nope. Hopkins and Will Fuller. There you go. Boom. Teammates. They're tied.
Wow.
They're tied against the. Look, Joe, you said this before the show that like everybody's going to be on Will Fuller, and Chris knows this from our podcast over at The Athletic. And I said, I'm not doing it. Stop. Like I wasn't doing it last week. I'm not doing it this week. At some point, you're going to be right. Just like Jared Cook. At some point, you're going to be right. But I'm not doing the 4 or 5 empty 0 weeks just to get to that 1 week. But I know you're going back to him again this week. But are you doing it in cash or only tournament?
Yeah, probably only tournament. I think the one thing you can say about Will Fuller, though, is this is the type of player you want to play at low ownership, not at high ownership.
Right. Yes.
I think that's something that people just don't understand. Like for a guy like this, it's not the time to go to him when he's chalk. But yeah, if I'm off him this week, I'm sure he'll go nuts and everyone will be super happy with me.
It'll be the chalkiest chalk play of all time that worked out. But Chris, you know this also from the podcast. I'm actually, for the point in what you just said, Joe, especially only tournaments. This isn't a cash play, but I'm playing QT on a lot of spots because one, he's so cheap. And I think that if you look at this offense and you look at how much they're getting to Watson, even with the trade of Tunsil, they still can't protect them. They got to get the ball out quick. And I really don't think Stills was a good fit for this offense because you have a route that needs to develop in Stills. You have routes that need to develop in Fuller. You have routes that need to develop in Hopkins. Get the ball out quick. Get the space, for the player, and Kiki QT, who could turn into a 7-8 reception game. And if so, he's going to hit 100 yards, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, that all seems nice. We saw it last year as well. I'm sure he's going to get more involved in the offense without Kenny Stills. I mean, you're dead on with Stills. He's never going to be a play until they fix the offensive line or they play a team that can't generate any pressure or Fuller is out of the lineup. But yeah, for QT, at $3,400 on DraftKings, again, to Joe's point, like if you're playing multiple lineups, like that's somebody that you can certainly take a shot on. Absolutely, yeah. And then they have no run game, right? They're just not running the football all that well. I'm actually surprised to hear that Fuller is chalk. To be honest, and I have watched. I know you guys have as well.
Fuller.
Yeah, and now, and you know what we say, like. Now is the time to get on him because of those. We haven't seen those games, but if he is going to be chalked, then maybe it's smart to kind of avoid him. But again, I'm just surprised to hear it because watching the Houston games, like Watson does not have any time to throw the football. I mean, he has taken a couple shots downfield with Fuller, and they've hit his fingertips. It's just been panic throws. It's like he just doesn't have that time like we've seen last year.
If I'm facing the Texans, I'm just cover 3 and rush the quarterback. Like he's not throwing anybody into the short game, but that's why this might help. This actually might help Will Fuller by having that outlet to kind of make the defenses play a little bit different. Yeah. But all right, so where are you looking at cash, Chris? Because the squeaky wheel gets the grease this week, because the cliche in sports.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go there in cash unless Stephon Diggs really is away from this team. From Minnesota, there's some reports that he's unhappy. I mean, I don't blame him. I get it. Thielen obviously unhappy as well. I mean, asked after the game if it was hard for him to get open against Chicago.
Yeah, he already apologized.
He had no, but
Sack
he did.
Up, man.
He apologized, but he did say it as well, right? I mean, he's obviously not happy. He did backtrack and say that
apologize.
Kirk Cousins. Sure. He did backtrack and say Kirk Cousins needs time, and that is the absolute truth. He does need time, but the offense still runs through Dalvin Cook. But I definitely like Thielen this week. I'll probably roll him out in tournaments. I think there's some safer options. Like I throw Tyler Boyd and Larry Fitzgerald as guys that I thought would be highly owned because of John Ross is gone. And Boyd,
Tyler Boyd's finally moved up. He's up to he's barely inside the top 10. Auden Tate's actually number 3.
Yeah, Auden Tate is interesting as well. I thought he'd be a little bit cheaper in some spots. FanDuel, $5,300. But for Boyd, I mean, 4th most targets, 4th most catches, no John Ross, up-tempo offense, not having a lot of success running the football. So I like him. And the same reason for Fitzgerald when we talked about Kirk, right? I mean, Fitz is probably going to be in play as well as an extra couple targets.
Here's one that you haven't mentioned, and I'll throw it to you first and then come back to Joe on this. Nobody's talking about it, and I'm looking at the ownership for both of them. It's pretty low. I mean, they're in mid-pack around A.J. Brown, Alshon Jeffrey, Cortland Sutton. These are the names these two guys are around. Why is nobody considering Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Geronimo Allison?
Yeah, they're both in the write-ups for cash and for tournaments. If Devontae Adams is not there, you absolutely take a shot on one of the two. I think the upside lies with MVS. He's got 17 more targets than Allison, but if one of them is going to score a touchdown, if I could pick one of the two, it's probably Geronimo because of his work inside the red zone over the past couple of years and already like a couple touchdowns, both red zone targets. So I have no problem with either or because I don't think Adams is going to suit up.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on MVS being the guy. If I did had to go to one of these guys, I could see his ownership getting extremely high towards the end of the week. Now that people are starting to realize that Adams isn't going to play, especially if this Cincinnati Odd and Tate thing becomes a really big deal. I could see people pivoting to the Green Bay game. It's always the same thing with Green Bay, though. They play such a historic offensive style that it's hard to get excited about them. But a condensed target share, I totally get that. I love the Dallas side of this game as well, but I have the same kind of pace concerns there. So we'll have to talk about that in a little bit in the tournament section.
Definitely have to talk about that in the tournament section. Anybody? We didn't get really much from you because we were just too busy joking around with the Texans, but some more of the guys you're looking at, Joe?
Yeah, I think that you can always kind of make an argument for someone that's extremely cheap in a great game environment. So like we mentioned Odd and Tate, but we didn't really talk a whole lot about it yet. I think he's going to end up being kind of the chalk at 3,500 on DraftKings. But another guy that definitely not for cash, but I do want to mention him quickly because I think he's an awesome play. Keyshawn Johnson at 3,500 all the way down. Played him on my main lineup last week without Damiere Byrd. I do think that anytime we can get a guy that is kind of running those deep targets, I know Arizona hasn't been airing it out at all, but his price is pretty bad relative to his opportunity, I think. So, it would be perfect if he just went off for a long touchdown the week after I played him. So just wanted to mention that.
Well, so real quick on that, just no concern. Well, I guess that's not a fair way to put it, but the concern is last week is the snap count was all, Sherfield got the start.
Right. Yeah, that was... I think pretty much everyone had Keyshawn at least projected for more ceiling there. But yeah, played like half the snaps. Sherfield got the start, like you said. And he was out there a lot when they were in the red zone as well. So that's definitely a concern. I just think getting pieces of this Cincinnati and Arizona game is something you're going to want to prioritize. And there is a lot to pay up for this week. So we got to try and make it work somehow. So cash games, I think, paying down for some of these guys. Yeah. What do you guys think about the Jets wide receivers? I'm trying to piece my way through like the Jamison Crowder thing. And if we get Darnold back, like maybe we just kind of go the Robbie Anderson route as well. So I don't know. They're cheap. Yes. That's the only reason I brought them up.
Yes. I'm on Robbie Anderson in general as a tournament, even if it's Luke Falk at quarterback, just because it's the matchup. And Chris knows this to talk about this as well, is Robbie Anderson is one of the ones I got asked about the most because he's inside my top 30 wide receivers for seasonal. And people are like, hey, Robbie Anderson with Luke Falk. Luke Falk can find him, and if he takes one play, it's going to go possibly to the house for 30, 40, even more yards than that. And it's really about the matchup. I know the Redskins let us down as a whole last week, Chris, and what we were saying is, we got to exploit this matchup. But more often than not, the matchups do bear out an opportunity.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I definitely will be interested in him if Darnold is playing, but he will become chalk at that point. To your point, yeah, if it's not Darnold, then maybe you'll get him with a lower ownership. The Eagles' second most passing yards allowed to quarterbacks, the most yards and most fantasy points to wideouts, 7 touchdowns already to wide receivers this season, and they haven't played a lot of great teams. So it's certainly concerning if you're an Eagles fan, we'll say that. But the secondary is just atrocious. And going back to Washington, you just brought them up quickly. I think we can go back to guys like, I know with New England, there's are they going to run the football? Is it all the points just going to come on the defense? Like, is Tom Brady going to come out of the game? But I wouldn't take too much stock into last week against Buffalo. Like, that is a really stout defense against the pass and against the run. So I think maybe Josh Gordon is somebody we talk about in tournaments, but I think Julian Edelman is in play as well as somebody who just, it's not a sexy play, but if you're a cash game player, you can basically count on double-digit points from him on DraftKings. Like, he's going to get his 8 to 9 targets, a few catches, and who knows how many yards he's going to rack up. At least going to be 60 or so. So I think he's back in play as well because, let's be honest, Washington is just not good on either side of the football, and defensively they can't stop anybody.
No, they definitely can't. All right, so at quarterback, Chris knows. I'm just going to come to you first, Joe. Chris knows specifically how I feel about this, and so does Pat Mayo because I did the same on his show. I am not doing Andy Dalton. Like, I don't care. Like, this is, I just said, matchups more often than not bear out the truth. But to go right back to that Redskins game, there was nothing there. Like we said, the Giants exploit that defense, and there was nothing. I can't do Andy Dalton. I know he threw for 400 yards in week 1, but he's been pretty awful as a quarterback, even with those yards. Just because it's Arizona, I feel like Andy Dalton is a trap at quarterback. Obviously, could be wrong. I can't do it.
Yeah, they throw the ball a lot. I guess you can say that in favor of them. They throw the ball more than anyone in the league. 72.3% of their plays have been passing plays this year. It is Arizona. The team total is nice. They're at home. Like, a lot of the things make sense. his yards per attempt is actually, one of the worst in the league. So you can say that. I don't know. I just don't play these guys that don't rush at all, unless I think there's like massive touchdown upside. And I don't think you can say that in the same sentence with Andy Dalton.
No, I mean, they're both interesting, like Dalton and Murray. They're both 3 and 4, right? They're in the top 4 in passing attempts. We've already mentioned some of their weapons so far in the first 10 minutes of this show. We've talked about Bengals. We've talked about Cardinals. So it is interesting, but I won't do it in cash either. I'm with Joe. Like I can't get there. His price is certainly appealing on DraftKings if you do want to spend down. I mean, there's some guys that I don't want to touch in that price range, like Kyle Allen. I don't want any part of Bridgewater. Cousins, you're really rolling the dice. Like if Diggs does play, I could see that in a tournament, but not in cash. Daniel Jones, no thanks. Josh Allen, no. So like in that range, if you want to go there, I mean, I get it, but I it's not for me in cash. Like I just can't put my money on Andy Dalton.
So then where are you going? Kyler Murray on the other side?
I do like Murray. I probably will roll him out a little bit more in tournaments than cash.
Really?
Yeah. I do like him, but he's just a little bit too expensive for me at $6,300. Like why? Like at that point, I'd just rather spend up $200 on Brady or just get to Watson or maybe just go down to Wentz in a 30-point total for the Eagles. I don't know if I'm feeling Rodgers without Adams, but certainly rather Wentz or just spend up for Brady and Watson. But I do like Kyler in tournaments. He's running around a lot more, 96 yards on the ground and a touchdown in his past 2 games. And obviously we know about Cincy's defense.
No Chase Daniel love for you guys if we're paying all the way down 4,800 on DraftKings.
I actually forgot his price. Section. I forgot his price. Yeah,
if we were playing Kyle Allen at 4K, I don't know. There is more to pay up for in this slate than I think we had last week. We'll get to tight ends as well, but it's pretty barren past those top guys. So it's going to allow you to do a lot with your team, especially if you're kind of on the David Montgomery train. I mean, you could get a nice kind of low-owned correlation there, but super cheap for both those guys if you want to build around that. I have no problem with that.
I will say DraftKings is the only site I would consider it on just because as we've been doing this show and I've been playing with the DraftKings pricing is tight this week. It's tough.
You're going to need the savings for sure.
Yeah, if you're putting in 2 running backs, not even the 8,000, if you're putting 2 7,000 plus running backs in, you're going to be struggling. Because I'm looking at it right now, and I was trying to play with it, and that's even with a cheap defense and a cheap tight end. So, we'll get to more of that. Actually, let's talk about tight ends. Cash game tight ends. You guys know this. I brought this up before we even jumped on the show. On FanDuel, is it Waller? Nope. Is it Andrews? Nope. Is it the number 1 scoring tight end so far in Evan Ingram? Nope. Is it Zach Ertz? Nope. The number 1 expensive tight end is Austin Hooper. So I'm assuming we're not going for the number 1 and we're going elsewhere, Chris.
Yeah, I'm not going to play him in cash. I mean, it does get interesting from tournaments because I would imagine everyone on FanDuel playing tournaments will not even bother with Austin Hooper's price at $6,700.
Well, here's why I'm off him too, is because they're the 3rd lowest APA for tight ends because you just attack Houston everywhere else, and it's not even just it's not even just the fact that you tack them everywhere else. If you look at it, what's been done by them, Greg Olsen had 4 targets, 2 catches for 5 yards last week against them. And Greg Olsen's having a resurgence of a season.
Yeah, he is. And, the targets have been there for Hooper, 33, 4th most among tight ends, 18 in his last 2 games. And last year, he was top 5 in terms of catches at the position. He's certainly trending up, and he's one of Matt Ryan's favorite targets. Like, he's definitely past a guy like Calvin Ridley, for example, in terms of just looks. But I'm not going to go there at this price. Absolutely not. Like, I'd rather just lock in Ertz. And I know Waller's in a tough spot, too. But if you're playing cash, like, you just know that Waller is going to come away with a few catches, and he's the main part of that offense. And it's just hard to find a tight end that is like the number 1 option in an offense. And Waller is definitely one of them, despite the tough matchup.
Yeah, I think one thing you have to think about with like the Darren Waller versus Zach Ertz thing, like I made this mistake when Waller was playing Minnesota. Like you said, he's so involved. We have to definitely consider him. His price is all the way up there now, but like you're getting deeper targets from Darren Waller. Like his yards per route run is nearing 3 yards per route, which is extremely high. Zach Ertz, you're going to get probably more routes overall, but they're going to be kind of lower equity routes. But I mean, high team total for Ertz. I think Ertz is the guy that I prefer, but maybe that's just my biases between like just playing these Oakland guys with these really low team totals. I do like the game environment a lot better for Philly than I do for Oakland, obviously. But I think that if you're paying all the way up, it's really still between those 2 guys for me this week. And I think you hit the nail on the head.
Okay. Anybody else before we move on to tournament picks or
Someone take the Tyler Eifert thing. Someone's got to. He's going to be a cash play this week. People are going to be talking about it all week.
Oh my God! I get. Well, let's find out his projected ownership real quick. I guarantee it's way too high. Do you know what? I think Chris knows because I mentioned it on the show. Do you know what his line was when he scored that touchdown, Joe? Off the top of your head?
I assume that he had like 3 yards probably on each of his routes and just literally fell in the end zone.
He's actually I have no idea. Chris, he had 3 catches, 9 yards, and a touchdown in that game. He is the most highest projected tight end by a wide margin over Darren Waller and Mark
extremely
Andrews.
Cheap.
Yes, so you probably play him in cash if you're a cash game player.
Nope, not doing it there either.
That's fine. You said the same thing about Aguilar, right? I mean, it's just
and Disley last week. How is it any different than Disley?
Oh no, I was on Disley last week. I was fine with Disley.
Yeah, I mean, I think you take those shots on fading those guys that are going to be chalk in tournaments. Like, yeah, it didn't work out. You fade Disley. But I mean, if you're a cash game player, again, you just take that value and take the matchup. And I think if you want to spend down at the tight end position, I mean, this is a spot to do it. I mean, why not? Again, if you're a cash game player, $4,600 over on FanDuel, I mean, you just lock them in and move on. And then you can spend up on the running backs or some, top tier wide receivers or even a defense. Like, I'd rather do that. But in tournaments, I probably will just kind of fade the other way because I don't want Eifert chalk. No thanks. No,
I don't want Eifert, period. It's so disgusting. Let's move on. Let's just get to.
He does score touchdowns, Jake.
He's scored one. He's scored
one, but when he's healthy, he scores touchdowns.
No, he hasn't scored touchdowns or been healthy in a long time. Get out of here.
I'm mentally preparing myself for this fade already. It's just not going to be fun.
No, there's another one for you. I'll get a Tyler Eifert. If Tyler Eifert finishes top 3, I'll get a Tyler Eifert jersey. There you go. There's another one.
And I will buy my second Will Fuller jersey this week.
That's terrific. All right, let's talk tournaments.
You down with GPP?
Yeah. All right, let's. I can't believe we're still Tyler Eifert. Anyway, running backs tournament wise, I guess Chris, I'll go to you first because do you want Terry Cohen that we were talking about before? Would you play him in DraftKings tournament, or are you just avoiding him? You just sounded kind of hesitant on him.
Yeah, I'm going to avoid him. I just thought it was interesting, a stat that we probably should be aware of because I think we're all on the same page here that this could be a Montgomery week. Like Cohen will probably catch a few balls, and I don't think any of us would be shocked if he came away leading the team in catches this weekend. But I do think that this is a Montgomery week. I think it's the week where he finds the end zone. I think it's the week where they lean on him. Oakland doesn't do a whole lot offensively, and he finds a way to get 20 touches. So I'm not going to go there. I understand the price is appealing at 48, but nah, I'm going to fade him.
Then where are you looking?
Well, I like some of the same backs, like Zeke and Fournette. I guess we really didn't touch on Fournette, but what we've seen from him, it's much like Christian McCaffrey. There's a safety there, is a guy who's playing like 90% of the snaps. There's nobody coming in and taking any of his touches away. Carolina's rush defense ranks 29 according to Football Outsiders. I mean, he has 16 catches, 23 targets. He's well on his way to surpassing career highs set as a rookie. So I still think he's undervalued on both sites. I mean, $6,400 on DraftKings for somebody who's catching the ball out of the backfield, and on FanDuel 69. So I mean, he's locked in for me. Between him and DJ, I think they're both solid prices.
Why do they not want to move Fournette's price? I don't get it either. Last week was the first week he wasn't using the passing game as much, but before that, 8 targets, 6 targets. Like he touched the ball literally 31 times last week, and he's still in the 6K range. So that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, should we just keep playing Christian McCaffrey at 25%? I think I'm going to keep doing that. 37 touches last week. Thanks for coming.
Dude's on pace for over 400 touches, 450 touches and 2,500 yards. Are you kidding me? I know he's not going to get there, but that's ridiculous. 90.
He's not going to get there because he'd be dead by October.
Well, we keep saying that. We keep saying that he's going to be dead, but in the 2 games without Cam, I mean, he has 64 touches. That's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable, but that's what he said. By the way, do you want to know what the percentage of his snaps that they played last week?
100?
Yep, 100%. With the quarterback, he played 100% of the snaps.
He's played 100% of 3 of the 4 games.
Are people just uncomfortable when they play him and they just don't have to they have to pay down everywhere else? I really don't. I opened that tournament this week and saw he was at 25%, and I was just like, what are people doing?
I actually have him in a tournament lineup. We'll get to that later. Just because of that, and I actually, this is going to be so much of a fun lineup. Why not? All right. So then, where else are you go? Here, I'll present a question to you, Joe. Then, how about this? Because we haven't even touched on them. We have Melvin Gordon coming back. Both are low ownerships, and could this be a situation where you might roll out both? I don't know that you'd want to do so in the same tournament, but maybe roll out Gordon in a couple, Eckler in a couple, just because of the upside.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one, right? Because how often they are leaning on these two guys, like playing them both. Like I did this actually 1 week last year with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. It actually worked out really well. So if you end up getting the game script that you want in that game, you hopefully capture all the touchdowns. It's not something I really would recommend people do, but against Denver, awesome team total there too. So at least interesting. I'm not really going to probably play one or the other yet. I kind of want to wait and see how things shake out. That's just kind of my play style. I don't really take a lot of chances at running back. I guess maybe I do. I played Leonard Fournette last week, which is extremely contrarian for some reason. But yeah, I don't know. I think both those guys are fine. If you're rolling out a lot of teams, maybe you just take some shots. I do think that there's still a chance that both of them could get there, though.
Yeah, I mean, the matchup is so nice.
It's glorious. Glorious.
It's
for all the wrestling fans out there, and nobody knows what
or
it
the
is.
Biggie fans.
All three of you listening. So let's talk wide receiver. Chris, I'm gonna do similar to what I did to just Joe, is one that we're not talking about. And as soon as I start the sentence, you're gonna know where I'm going. But if you want to play the narrative, and if you want to play the narrative of, hey, they just got smacked in the chin and in the face, knocked out in the first round, and your team that can come out with said quarterback and say, screw you guys, we're going to throw 3 touchdowns before the second half even arises, and one of those touchdowns goes to Josh Gordon. Like Tom Brady, Josh Gordon, Julian Edelman, Philip Dorsett, like you have to have some appeal in a tournament for this team, don't you, Chris?
Yes, absolutely. And Brady too, and on DraftKings, he's the 3rd highest priced quarterback, but on FanDuel, you got to scroll a little bit to find him, $7,600. Yeah, which is crazy. And again, even talking to some people doing some shows, they're just down on the New England offense because of last week. Again, guys, this isn't the Buffalo Bills defense that they're playing this week. And the Bills defense is good. It's time for people to start believing in them. But
so
Washington,
reactionary.
Yeah, it's nuts. Brady sucks. He's brutal. You see that play in the end zone. Yeah, he had a very bad game. He threw the ball 39 times and 150 yards. Awful. But before that, 306 yards, 2 touchdowns. 2 touchdowns the game before that. Pittsburgh, 341 and 3 scores. There's a chance to get on him now, and there's an opportunity that he's going to throw 4 touchdowns. He could do that.
I didn't have to buy his jersey because he was Daniel Jones as I expected.
Yeah.
But I say that tongue in cheek because it's Daniel Jones was as expected and still had a good day.
Yeah, he's 23 for 25, Jake, on 10 yards or fewer. He just struggled throwing the ball down the field, which you have alluded to numerous times. Brady can throw the ball down the field. I think that they get Gordon involved in this game. I think he was quiet last week. He had to deal with Brown week 2. I think that they get him involved, and I'm predicting a touchdown at least. I think he's a lock for one.
Yeah, I love the Gordon call. If you're just kind of grasping for straws at times with New England, it feels like trying to pick the right one. But in multi-entry, if you're not playing a quarterback that has rushing ability, you want that massive ceiling, and that's Brady almost every week, right? And Gordon's price, 6,100, I think is still totally reasonable. I think the one guy that I want to make sure we touch on again is someone we talked about last week, Marquise Brown, Hollywood. Lamar just missed him in the end zone last week, but he's just dominating the Ravens as far as opportunity is concerned. 36% of the team's air yards, 23% of the targets. His ADOT's nearing 15 yards. So I think that once they get on the same page, they could be one of the most dynamic duos in the entire league. I truly believe that. So if people are just going to jump off, yeah, exactly. So, now that we don't have that type of scare we had when the start of the season. This kid is so talented that I think if people are going to jump off that, this is, maybe it's similar to the Fuller play and I'm just falling in love with Hollywood and these deep targets, but man, I love his talent. I think he's in a great spot this week as well. Jackson's had pretty good deep ball accuracy this year. I think that's something that people don't talk about enough. And he's gonna try. So that's what we want, right? Guys that are at least gonna try and go deep for upside. So I'm going back to Hollywood this week for sure.
Yeah, I love that call.
Problem is Lamar Jackson, he's the most expensive quarterback on FanDuel. It's just but you get the savings in Marquise Brown, so you can pair them together. Anybody else before we move to? Yeah, well, there you go. Quarterbacks. Is that something that you're going to do, Joe? Would you pair them in a tournament?
Yeah, like you said, like exactly what you just said, right? So he's so expensive, I don't think people will do it. So you can think about that from a leverage perspective as well. Like I actually kind of like the Baltimore side of this game. I don't like to attack games that are in division typically, but he's so expensive in tournaments that I think you can make an argument there, especially when a lot of people, if they are paying up on FanDuel, it's probably going to be for Deshaun Watson at 8K. So just for 300 more, getting Lamar Jackson at lower ownership, especially if you're rolling back with Hollywood, I think makes a lot of sense.
Giddy up. Yeah, no, I love the call. I mean, yeah, you made great points. I mean, Brown is that deep threat guy. He's the poster boy for the tournaments, right? He's the same guys like Fuller and Deshaun Jackson. We already saw it from week one. I mean, he hardly touched the field in week one, and he had that monster game. So yeah, he's absolutely in play. I think the ceiling is very high for him.
All right, so then, Chris, do we have any tournament differences for tight end, or is it kind of all the same guys we already talked about?
Yeah, it's kind of all the same guys. I mean, Waller for cash because the ceiling is not as high with going up against Chicago, but Joe alluded to it. It's Ertz. I think his ceiling is much higher. I mean, Evan Ingram is interesting. I wonder if people will come off him because of the Vikings and Golden Tate is coming back and he's going to play his first game there. So it remains to be seen how that offense is going to run. But I think Evan Ingram is the guy. Like if I was to choose one of the three pass catchers of the Giants, that'd be the guy I would choose.
It feels that way.
Yeah.
I was a little bit nervous after the whole Mike Gesicki debacle that one week, but like one of the things that led me towards that play was just routes run, right? It's just so important at tight end because these guys block so much. So I was a little bit scared last week to bring up the Noah Fant type of play, and then he scores. So I mean, it's easy to say that after the fact, but he's still 2,800.
We believe
he's running,
you.
and he's top 8 in routes. I don't know. I don't know if he's really in play against the Chargers, but that's what you should be looking for when you're paying all the way down, I think. If you want to maybe go after someone that's kind of in the mid-range, like if you want to do that and try and get pivot off of Tyler Eifert, maybe Delaney Walker at 3,900 against Buffalo. Just another guy that's just seeing a pretty large opportunity share that hasn't quite gotten there yet.
Shuts it down.
I think he's losing. I mean,
well, here's the thing. So,
what's the Eifert pivot then? I'm just looking at this range.
I like the Fant one more because you said the Chargers defense. I was going to bring this up, and again, people are going to see it over in the kit. Again, podcast get you 10% off if you want to go look and you're not in there. Denver against the Chargers. Chargers have the 12th most favorable. It's not at the top, but it's actually the 12th best against tight ends favorable for adjusted fantasy points allowed. When you talk about tight ends, the Buffalo Bills are the worst, 5.5.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, don't listen to me when it comes to tight ends anyway. I think I've rolled out Kelsey for his floor week in week 1. Week 2, I played Gesicki. Week 3, I rolled out Ertz, I think, for his floor game. And then last week, I played Ingram. So basically, do the opposite of what I said.
No.
Jimmy Graham week.
I got to tell you, for tight ends just in general, I wish so. If you play the Monday, Thursday games, I am so much on George Kittle just because you talk about opportunities. He has a giant play called back, a touchdown called back for penalty. Like, oh God, I want so much. I wish
they just run the ball.
I know. I wish Kittle was on this slate so much. All right. So we're set there. We're ready to talk some stacks. Yes?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's talk stacks.
Stack Attack.
So I'm very tempted. I initially had this in one of my lineup. You know what? I might keep this lineup just for the fun of it. It's a 4-person stack, and I'm for tournaments only. Obviously, I'm really interested in the fact that the ownership seems to be down. And I think it's because of last week's game. And I think it's because the perception is the Dallas defense is still really strong. I'm rolling just because of the savings of what you can do with Christian McCaffrey and David Johnson and still pay up for another wide receiver. You put Aaron Rodgers, Geronimo Allison, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Jeremy Graham in your lineup, you can basically buy almost anything else you want.
Yeah. And that's what's so appealing when you spend down on a stack like that. And I think that's why, we just brought up Andy Dalton earlier. It's the same sort of thing. Like if you wanted to go Dalton and Boyd, just those two alone, you can spend up on the 3 backs like Joe says. I mean, you can easily get DJ in there with that price, but you can get Fournette, you can get Zeke, you can get McCaffrey, you can go and just with multiple lineups, just choose that. And if all those backs hit, you're likely on your way.
Yeah, I'm not so much on Aaron Rodgers this week. I think maybe I just kind of need to get over some of the biases that he's been so terrible. But
but that's why, because everybody's off of him.
Great spot. Yeah, I mean his price hasn't really moved either. Though there's so many guys in the 5K range that are at least a little bit cheaper But I mean, with everyone kind of paying probably all the way up for someone like Deshaun Watson in that range, like is paying down for someone like Rodgers, like you said, it's about what it allows you to do in the rest of your lineup, not necessarily the play itself. I will say, if you are going to pay up for Deshaun Watson, I'm going to actually do this for my stack. So Deshaun Watson to DeAndre Hopkins. If everyone's going to play Will Fuller, it's not really that much of a buy low or anything like that. He's still 7,800, but he only had 9 PPR points last week. Like DeAndre Hopkins, like, you guys remember this guy? Like, he's still seeing like a massive target share, right? So top 4 in weighted opportunity rating. I mentioned that metric like every single week because it's I think it's one of the best metrics there is.
Joe, I'll just give you you want the perception? The perception in fantasy, I'll give you a perfect example. I have 3 different people have asked the same exact question, which is interesting. I guess maybe as a Godwin owner, these are what people are thinking and smartly doing so. But they still ask if they should do it. Should I trade Goodwin for Hopkins as a seasonal? And I'm like, seriously, how? Like, but you're shaking your head. Exactly. That's the perception right now. It's just people are like off Odell Beckham. They're off DeAndre Hopkins. It's just they're so disappointed for a couple of weeks that they just forget how good these guys can be.
Disgusting.
Well, and what I mean too is like if everyone's playing Fuller and we mentioned like these are the kind of guys you don't play at high ownership, like go to the guy like that's more talented, that has a higher opportunity share. If he's going to be the one that's less popular, there you go. It's talking about upside at that. No, I don't know. I think that stack is going undervalued right now as far as just kind of looking through the ownership and stuff. I think you can probably put it up there as far as ceiling for sure. So,
what's your stack, Chris?
Let's go to Arizona. Let's do Murray and DJ and Fitz. Let's get those guys in there. I think both of them could come away with, we think 20 catches between them is possible. I mean, the Bengals are that bad. They really are. So, I mean, Murray, I think, is going to continue to chuck and he can run one in. So, yeah, let's go with Arizona.
Let me say one thing real quick. And this is a strategy, and I know the Bengals are, quote unquote, they really are so bad. But this is similar to something that people know if they play fantasy baseball. And Chris, we've actually brought this up before, and I know Joe's going to immediately start shaking his head when I say this, is like when everybody is like, it's the Rockies. And so when you're in Colorado, everybody's like, stack the Rockies lineup. And on one tournament lineup, you put the pitcher on the other side, you put a few players on the other side. So I'm just saying, is there any way you guys, either one of you in a tournament, would play the Bengals defense with Joe Mixon and the running back defense correlation, because 0 people are going to have that?
So I would play Arizona's defense because the other way, the fact that Dalton's been the second most sacked, he get sacked like 8 or 9 times in that game last week. I mean, they took out their starting left tackle because they were worried about him getting hurt in the game that was completely a blowout, but they kept Dalton in and they didn't really care that he was on his ass, 10 times. So the fact that Arizona could maybe get some pressure, I know it's not a great defense, but if they, dial up some pressure, they got a few sacks in the past couple games, I think 11 on the year. So I would go the other way, but I see what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, both of these defenses are in play, but when you come off of like New England or Chicago, it gets pretty scary because New England is averaging 22 fantasy points a game. Like that's unbelievable.
It's ridiculous.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though. They're both in play because of how much of these teams throw, right? And the defenses aren't good by any means, but if you get a pick 6 out of one of these guys at a super cheap price point, definitely like them. I like the Arizona call, though, just because of kind of what you guys were saying about if they're going to be so chalky on the other side. It's a great strategy just to stack up a really high total game that everyone loves for offense, and you just get that pick 6 and you can totally flip the script on people in GPPs.
All right, so let's do it. Let's put our lineups out there for everybody to mock. And actually, real quick, how do we? I'll ask afterwards. How about that?
DFS Battle Royale.
How did you guys do last week?
I don't even know. It's gonna be fun. It's like I don't know if I didn't play that lineup, and I don't even remember.
You didn't play the lineup.
No, I didn't play the lineup. I come off of a lot of things by the time Sunday morning rolls around, I'll be honest. I don't necessarily play the lineup that I give in cash, but I will play this one.
Make a second lineup.
I'll come up with the point total. I don't even remember.
Do you know what you scored, Jake?
I do know what I scored. I scored one. That wasn't a very good week because 104.48. Christian McCaffrey, Lamar Jackson had half my points.
Let's go. First win for me, I think, in this thing. And I had Terry McLaurin in my lineup still because I just wasn't paying attention to FanDuel in the morning. So it took a 0 there. Wow. I had the Lamar to Hollywood, of course. And then I had all the running backs, McCaffrey, Eckler, David Johnson. I did have the Will Dissly chalk somewhere, at least. That's nice. And then, Will Fuller for his 3 points. So it was a standard week.
Let's get in a friendly comp, and then we can follow along on Sundays.
We should do that.
Or just play the actual lineup, Chris, and sack up. Come on, man.
Well, if we get into a friendly comp, then we'll play the lineup.
All right, so Joe, since you're the champion from week 4, go. What's your lineup?
My lineup looks really similar now that I look at it back to back, but I'm going to go Lamar Jackson to Marquise Brown.
Right.
I'm going to stack up the running back volume per usual. McCaffrey, Kamara, David Johnson. I am going to pay up for Zach Ertz at tight end. So wide receiver, Auden Tate. That's how I'm going to save this week. 5,300. I think is a really good price for that opportunity. Adam Thielen. I'm gonna grease kind of the squeaky wheel with him. I think he gets a couple of deep shots in this game. I don't love ever playing a Minnesota wide receiver right now, but I think there's a chance. At least Thielen's seeing the deeper targets of the two guys. Then I'm gonna round it out with the Atlanta defense. 3,300. I'm just going to keep playing defenses against Houston just because of how many sacks Deshaun Watson takes. Atlanta, it's not an amazing spot. Don't love to play defenses on the road, but it kind of made this lineup fit because of how cheap they are.
Yeah, so Chris, I'm going to go next only because I got to differentiate, and it starts off very similar. Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown have the same. David Johnson have the same. So I went Zeke over Kamara, so we're a little bit different there. I actually do have Josh Gordon in my lineup. I paid up for Darren Waller just because the volume, and I play a tournament style here, and I think a lot of people are, as you can see by the ownership projections, are off because it's the Bears. So I did get the McCaffrey Panthers stacked together because I think the Panthers, a lot of people are on them. They've had a really good defense. Minshew Mania has been running wild through your heads and all that type of stuff, and this could be a game where, hey, he's still a rookie. The bad game is coming at some point. And then to save because of David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott, and Christian McCaffrey and all these, of course, Kiki QT. Got to get him in the lineup.
QT week. Very nice. So
hey, I had to get somebody at 4,500.
Yeah, makes
Even if
sense.
it's a zero. I love the rest of the lineup.
So I made a couple adjustments just to be a little different here. I'll give somebody a cash game lineup here for FanDuel. I'll start with Tom Brady at $7,600. I think he's a very good price. I got DJ as well, so I guess I'm not being totally different than you guys. But DJ's in there, Zeke is in there, Tyler Boyd, Josh Gordon. I agree with Joe. I think Adam Thielen is going to be involved this week. Tyler Eifert is the punt play at tight end. Leonard Fournette in my flex. And then Bears D. I have enough really to go up to the Pats D, but I think this is going to be a Brady week where he throws 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Jeez, that's like the chalkiest chalk I've ever chalked.
That's why it's cash.
So what's your tournament?
Get a win.
What's your tournament?
I didn't ask for 2 lineups.
No,
you know who I like, a quarterback that we didn't really touch on?
Fine, do that.
Is Matt Ryan. I'm going to play Matt Ryan this week in tournaments. The fact that he leads the NFL 176 passing attempts. They have absolutely no run game at all. They cannot run the football. So I think Matt Ryan's going to come in this game again and throw 40-plus passes. He's got 300 yards in every single game. His 8 touchdowns ranked second. So, as much as we're crapping on the Falcons, it's more so Freeman and their defense. So I think Matt Ryan is an interesting quarterback.
If only you had a chance to bring that up when we talk quarterbacks or tournaments.
Well, you actually didn't ask quarterbacks in tournaments. So
did I? Did I not?
No, we kind of touched on all the same guys. We brought them all up.
We spent so much time on Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, we spent so much on and Ryan is cheaper than Rodgers. Much better.
He is. Oh, so
what do you think about Ryan versus Wentz? I think that's a pretty good decision point in tournaments for sure.
I think both of them are intriguing. Since we're doing this at the end, I completely skipped. You should have brought it up while we were doing it. What about quarterbacks? I even set you guys up. I said, are we ready to do lineups? You could have been like, no, we didn't do quarterbacks.
It's all good.
So answer his question. Joe asked, are you on Wentz at all on that? Are you just fully on board with the Ryan?
I'm fully on board with Ryan. I do like Wentz. We've said this before. What weapon are you going to pair him up with? I think Ertz makes a whole lot of sense, but he can just spread that ball around. Too. Yeah, Jeffrey certainly does too. But what I've seen from the Eagles over
he's not a cash play.
Sure. What I've seen from the Eagles over the past couple weeks is they're running the football. They're kind of leaning on the offensive line in the run game. We didn't really bring up Jordan Howard. And I know it's oh, gross. Why would you bring up Jordan Howard? But the offensive line is creating some massive holes for him. And every single week he continues to get more plays, right? It was 6 carries, 8, 11, 14. He's top 5 in red zone rushing attempts. He's the goal line back. So I think in a game where if Darnold doesn't play and this team is up 15 points in the second half, that they'll lean on the backs, and that's why I'm just a little cautious with Wentz.
All right. Joe, counter argument, or are you in agreement there?
I'm with you. I actually don't mind the call to Alshon as well. I think a lot of people will go the Ertz route with Wentz. I just think that's a price point that, just at least the ownership that I'm looking at, I think Matt Ryan could be pretty popular, at least on FanDuel at 7,700. So yeah, I think that's a really good call. They're passing a ton, right? But on the road, I still think I prefer all the other guys we talked about. But anyways, it's Lamar Jackson to Hollywood this week again, finally. So it doesn't matter.
Let's do it. And hopefully everybody out there do it too. Again, podcast get you 10% off to the DFS Pass. We'll be back again next week. Follow Joe Holka at Joe Holka. Chris Meaney is at Chris Meaney. I'm at All In Kid. We'll give you more advice. These aren't the only lineups, as Chris mentioned, as Joe mentioned. We'll help you guys on Twitter as well and help you for week 6 next week. Already a quarter of the way through the season. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.